Okay, thanks for having me and thanks for doing this. I, of course, came from the corporate sector. For the longest time, I was in some research companies doing research, writing as an economist and such. And my last job before joining Financial Alliance, I was with a company called Standard & Poor's, doing ratings for countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, India, and such. Came to a point where you have a midlife crisis, and I came to about 40 years old, and I decided I need a change. I wanted to move into something else, which probably was, to an extent, a bit slower than the corporate world, but challenging nonetheless. And so I joined Financial Alliance initially as an economist, as an investment director. And after 1 or 2 years, I kind of realized that there's this gap in the market where basically we don't really have, or at that point in time, we didn't have an outfit, the department basically to serve our Muslim clients. And I've always believed that my own personal belief is in life, when Allah throws something in front of me, and an opportunity, sometimes even challenges, there's a reason for it. And I think when that arose, I'm like, okay, maybe it's for me now to do something. It's and when you look at it, basically we are a community of 500,000 Muslims in Singapore. Islam is our way of life, and part of that is the muamalat part of it, which is the so-called transactions, investments, and such. And we have to fulfill that, basically. And basically for a group, for a community, those who have knowledge, those who have an opportunity to do so, it then falls upon them as a fardu kifayah to do so. And I felt very strongly that at that point in time, and even up to today, that is a responsibility now, not only on my shoulders but many other shoulders, to put forth this knowledge that we have to fulfill this so-called responsibility. And so that started the whole journey of creating FAiWA, and in broader sense, educating the community on Islamic financial planning. Well, working in a company which basically is a conventional based financial advisory firm. And to be fair, no financial advisory firm in Singapore, whether you are a FA financial advisory firm or even a tied agency at that point in time, had basically what we call an Islamic department. And so basically I had to sit down with the management. I had to convince them, because the management looks at it more from a commercial perspective, whereas I would look at it from more of a religious responsibility perspective, but also to convince them that there is this opportunity. And so one of the biggest challenge was to kind of approach it in a way whereby, I don't know whether you've heard of that story where the salesman goes to this island and he sees only like one person or two person wearing shoes, and he's selling shoes, and like 90% of the population doesn't wear shoes. He could either say that there's no opportunity, or he could say that there's a lot of opportunity. So I had to kind of convince the management that although at that point in time, based on my discussion with friends in the industry, we felt that maybe at that point 10-20% of the population required Sharia compliant products. Not a lot, because then the 80% did not at that point in time. But I turned it around to tell management that's an opportunity. So I think that was one of the biggest challenge, because once we crossed that hurdle, then I think things became easier, because it was just focusing on trying to make it better and what we want to produce for the community. So I think Financial Alliance itself, by itself, differentiates itself from other financial advisory firms because it is basically considered itself to be an independent financial advisory firm, independent FA. And so the processes governing the way we do things is very independent. We're not driven by sales targets, we're not driven by sales incentives, by insurers, by fund managers and such. We ensure that we have multiple products in order for the clients to have multiple choices rather than just one product itself. And so this ensures that we have independent thought, an independent thought process when it comes to serving clients. And I think that jives into the Sharia side of it, which basically is ensuring that the consumer gets the best out of the whole experience itself. On the other hand, I think when I first set up FAiWA, it was basically the only Sharia, or rather the only Islamic financial advisory department that is basically recognized as a corporate entity, part of a corporate entity. Let me explain a little bit more. So if you go to Financial Alliance's website and you pull down the menu of services, you'll find that there is so-called services for individual investors, services for insurance, services for corporates, and then there's an Islamic services. So Financial Alliance as a corporation recognizes Islamic solutions, Islamic services as one department within the company itself. So we are not basically a group of people in the company serving clients as a group of advisors. We do have, but we are at the corporate level, which makes a big difference. Because why? Because when you're at the corporate level, you have allocated, dedicated resources. You can make decisions much faster. Give you an example. When we've come across Sharia compliant products which we feel are good, are useful, we are able to then talk to the so-called product provider on a B2B basis, on a business-to-business basis, on a corporate-to-corporate basis. Okay? It would be different if we were just a group of advisors trying to talk to a fund management firm and such, because that's no longer on the same footing. So we get a lot of things done basically for the mere fact that we are actually a corporate entity rather than just a group of advisors. I think FAiWA's mission is quite simple. It is basically to bring Islamic financial planning to the masses, and when I say masses here is of course the Muslim community. Okay? To ensure that they are able to conduct their financial planning in accordance to Sharia. It's as simple as that. Because again, going back to the responsibility of Fardu Kifaya, being someone in that position, if I do not execute, if I do not provide, if I do not take this step, then I will be responsible on the day of judgment, basically, for being someone who had the opportunity, the ability, but did not actually fulfill those responsibilities. Okay? So the mandate or objective of FAiWA is very straightforward. Then the next step was how to bring that to the community. So there were two big challenges then when we now talk about bringing Islamic financial planning to the community. Number one is having the supply, i.e. the products and services. And as you know, Islamic products and services can be quite limited. So one of the challenge was to create new products and services, which we did. We created one with Phillip Capital, where we have now currently what we call iREITs, Islamic REITs, and also we have brought in some Sharia compliant funds and such. Yeah. And the other side of it is the demand side, which is, as I mentioned earlier, initially 10 years ago, we estimated that maybe about 20% of the community required Sharia compliant products and services. We felt it wasn't because that they outright the 80% did not want to, but they just needed some education. And I think this is a fair statement, because you go to any madrasa, probably even when you start learning, even if you go for the weekend madrasas in the mosques and such, I don't know about now, but I do believe that they don't teach you about muamalat. They'll teach you, how to salat, pray and fast and baca Quran and such, but not muamalat. It's the same with our conventional education. You go to university, they'll teach you how to make money, but they never teach you how to manage your money. And so basically, it is education. And so one of our strong belief was that we needed to educate the community. And therefore, if you know us, you would know that for the longest time we have been out there giving talks, giving seminars, conferences, workshops on Islamic financial planning. Yeah. And Alhamdulillah, I think that number, not through our sole effort, but also through effort like yourself and others, that number probably now has grown to maybe 40%, 50%. We don't have any what we call surveys and such, but just judging from talking to people in the markets, probably maybe 50 or even slightly more than 50% of Muslims in Singapore now require Sharia compliant products. It depends on where the statement is coming from. Who says it? If a non-Muslim tells me that, I say, you probably have it right from your perspective, because for a non-Muslim it's hard for them to understand Sharia. All they understand is SRI, socially responsible investment, ESG, and so when they say Sharia, they see Sharia, they say, this is just a subset or kind of like an overlap of these two other so-called socially responsible kind of way of investing. When we talk to a Muslim, then it's different. Yeah, because that's why education is important. And we have found out throughout the years that many Muslims may not know or need to be reminded where the aspect of the prohibition of riba stands. I always tell people that I remember the first time we collaborated with an Ustad to do a session in Masjid Sultan. We had a full packed audience, 200 over people, and he was telling the audience about the prohibition of riba, and he gave an example and he said, if there was basically on one side of the table makanan yang haram, prohibited food, and on the other side riba, for example, and nothing else, and you had to make a choice. So the scholars are quite unanimous in this. Between the two, the one that is more sinful is riba, and between the two, if you had to make a choice, you would take the food which is non-halal. So everybody was gasping and like in horror that what is this? But that's the reality of it, because as we all know, in the Quran there's only one verse which basically mentions where Allah and the Messenger, His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, declares war on a believer, on a Muslim, and that's when that Muslim is involved in riba. Okay? And so the severity of riba is actually nothing to be, you can't play around with it. It's very clear. It is among the major sins, and I hope one day that the community, everyone will understand that, because I think right now, by and large, when we talk about food, we have that sensitivity with respect to is it halal? How can you say no pork, no lard is halal? Just because you don't serve this, and so on and so forth. Yeah? And we are quite peculiar. I even know of people who will take up a can of whatever and read through the contents and say E24, E44, no, those kind of things. So the sensitivity is very, very high. But unfortunately, the sensitivity with investment products and services is not there yet. Like I mentioned, there's still a group of people who may not, or may still accept the fact that conventional products provide me higher returns, and therefore, why should I be investing in something which has a lower return? I mean, my answer to that basically is, as Muslims, first and foremost, first principle is that it's a non-Sharia compliant product is haram on the basis of riba. Okay? And basically, returns for a Muslim does not necessarily have to come in this world, because as a Muslim, our timeline transcends this world into the hereafter. And so I always, in my talks, for example, remind Muslim investors that you may sometimes invest in a Sharia compliant investment and not get the return, and you may forgo the opportunity to invest in a non-Sharia compliant conventional investment which had done very well. Okay, in this world you may think that you have lost because you didn't make what you wanted to make. You even lost money, but because you adhered to the commandments of Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala, then the returns will come actually in the hereafter, and then you will realize that basically that loss in this world was merely nothing temporary, and your rewards come. So I think that has to be the basis of Muslim, and that's what we educate Muslim investors about. So I think that's how we go about it. So we basically the first phase was to ensure that Muslim investors or Muslim clients received what we call the best Sharia compliant products available in the market. And so that entailed making sure that the unit trust was Sharia compliant. Okay? That entailed that we would have basically product providers guiding us on the so-called wasiat side, estate planning side. Okay? And when it came to the insurance side, because at that point, including up to now probably, one could say that there's no takaful product. And according to the fatwa from MUIS, you ought to be asking your own scholars as to the permissibility of conventional insurance. And so we basically got a Sharia scholar on board, okay, which is very rare because Sharia scholars typically sit on the boards of product providers to certify that a certain product is Sharia compliant. That's it. They don't have to sit on an investment advisor. They don't have to sit with a financial advisor. Because by the time the financial advisor takes the product, it's Sharia compliant. But because in Singapore it's quite unique, we do not have a takaful. So we had a Sharia scholar come in to issue a fatwa for ourselves to say that basically which type of conventional insurance temporarily under the principle of darurah is permissible for Muslims to use under certain conditions, very strict conditions. It's not just basically there's no takaful, you can take anything. No, under certain strict conditions you are able to take this particular product. And so I think we were then able to, in the first phase, go out to clients very confidently, tell them that we have a Sharia solution for your investment. Estate planning, we are able to give you the so-called Sharia solutions, i.e. wasiat. And even for insurance where there is no takaful, we are able to produce a fatwa from our Sharia scholar, who is a reputable one, to say that this is the type of conventional insurance that is permissible for you. And I think people appreciate that. And I'll give you one example. Why? Because there are a few, there are some instances that I've received emails and calls from either the public asking, I've been looking around for Sharia solutions. I've met a few people, but I just don't feel comfortable. When I see them, either they talk about conventional and they mix it around with Islamic, or sometimes they just don't give me that sense that they kind of know everything very well. I came across your website, and after talking to me and me explaining to them everything, they felt that basically this is what I want. This is the solution. This is the package that I want, because you've covered everything and you are quite strict about it. Okay? So I think one of the key principles that, again, when I first started FAiWA, what level of strictness do I want? And I think the word strict isn't correct, because Sharia isn't strict. Sharia is just Sharia. It allows a lot of flexibility. As we all know, everything is halal until proven haram. Okay? And so our approach is just to use Sharia and say, according to Sharia, there is flexibility, but to a certain extent, you cannot use it to the extent that you want to. You must use it within the realms of what it allows. So I think people appreciate the fact that we put in effort to ensure that basically when we believe that you can't, we don't. And I'll give you one very, very, very unique example. Someone comes to us with 100,000 CPF to invest. Let's say CPF OA. Okay? If you look into the CPF list of OA in unit trust, there's only one Sharia compliant unit trust and it's a global equity fund. There's no sukuk. there is no equivalent of the bond side. So if you are a moderate investor and you come to me and you are typically 50% equity, 50% bonds, by right, I would, as a Muslim, I would give you 50% Sharia compliant equity and 50% sukuk. Okay? But since there's no sukuk in the CPF, okay, some, not us, some advisors out there would say, why don't you just replace this with a conventional bond? And again, I'm not debating anything. Again, we are all just responsible for our own actions. But on our side, we effectively tell the client there is no sukuk, therefore leave your money in the CPF. Okay? Because we believe that the lesser evil between your money in the CPF, which is less debatable in many ways. There are people, there are scholars out there who say that money is permissible, okay? Or that interest is permissible. Some are not, but again, debatable. Less so buying a conventional fixed income instrument, where most scholars, if not all, will say this is prohibited. You know? So we end up with a client who comes to us with $100,000, invest 50% in a Sharia compliant unit trust, and we turning away the other 50% to say that you're better off putting it in. So you can see from here, it's nothing to do with making money, because if anybody wanted to make money, it would have been to take everything and invest, you know. But this is principle. This is guided by principle. And I think this is what we impart to our consultants here. You do good, again, your reward may come in this world, inshallah, or if not, in the hereafter. So one of the things that, if you go to Malaysia, for example, you'll find that all the Islamic financial planners go through courses, IFP, Islamic financial planning courses. They even have designations and such, which you don't have in Singapore. So one of the first thing we did was basically, if we were to send individuals like yourself, consultants out there to meet Muslim clients, we needed to equip you with the necessary skills. Okay, especially on the Sharia side, the religious side of it. And so we created in-house a 2-day module, a 2-day workshop, where we actually brought down our Sharia scholar internally. I would also be part of that trainer team or team of trainers. We brought in product providers from the Sharia products and such. And so for 2 days, you will sit in and understand, why is it that this product is Sharia? What is it that makes it important for how to understand the Muslim consumer? Why do Muslim consumers sometimes think this way? Sometimes they act this way, you know. So I mean, I can give you many examples, like you know, we educate, and you have gone through it, the importance of wakaf. Why is it important, if you are an advisor, okay, that no matter what, when you talk to your client, you need to bring up this aspect of wakaf, you know, that you encourage your clients to do wakaf. Because we all know, based on the hadith, that basically there's only 3 things, you know, that will continue to give you good deeds when you're no longer around. And one of them is amal jariyah, wakaf. Okay? And so if you are a trusted advisor to your client and you care about your client, you need to tell him to do a wakaf, because it's for his own good. Yeah? And so we educate consultants, and they understand. Yeah? So the whole thing, we go through the whole thing. I think that it in itself allows the advisor to then go out confidently. Some advisors, of course, prior to that, they would have known a lot of this, but we formalize it and such. And some who are starting from scratch learn a lot. I think one thing I want to talk about this 2-day workshop that we have. We have always made it a point to invite our friendly competitors, and I'm talking people who are actually our competitors, Muslim advisors from elsewhere to come and join us. Yeah? And it is deliberate because from the very beginning we felt that basically we cannot keep this knowledge to ourselves. If our intention and niyat is basically to educate the community, then it should not be a question of you're my competitor, I should keep this knowledge away from you. Rather, it is, I hope that I would give you some knowledge so that you can make life better for the community from the Sharia perspective. And inshallah, whatever good you do comes back to us in some form or way. And so I think that is a very strong message from FAiWA, that is not just all about dollars and cents, but it's about, again, making sure that the community is taken care of, given that we shoulder this big responsibility. I think being an advisor is not an easy job. But let's put even the Sharia aspect aside first. Yes, I think first of all, if you want to be an advisor, you must understand that it carries a lot of responsibility. You are advising people on their wealth, managing their wealth, reaching important goals in their lives like retirement and such. So it's a heavy responsibility. And when you add on that Sharia aspect to it, it becomes extra heavy, because you then become accountable not only in this world but on the Day of Judgment as to how did you execute, how did you fulfill your responsibility in those shoes. Okay? And so I would say for someone who wants to join FAiWA, basically you have to really think about it. Number one, not only the responsibility of an advisor, but the responsibility, taking on responsibility as an Islamic financial advisor. Okay? And if you're prepared to do so, the rewards are tremendous. Imagine how you help people with their wakaf. Imagine how you would help someone who has for the longest time done his investment in a non-Sharia compliant manner to move him to do it in a Sharia compliant manner, and so on and so forth. So inshallah you will get your rewards. Okay. So for me, it's just a question of, are you willing to take that responsibility? And there'll be many times where principles will come. There'll be a time where you probably will have to make a choice between principles and monetary rewards. As I mentioned earlier, the CPF example. So someone joining FAiWA would probably not even have to think about it, because that's how we would want to train you, and say that no, leave your money in your CPF. I'm not here to make your commission out of advising you to put your money in something which I personally feel, or we personally feel, isn't Sharia compliant. So that would be the advisor that I would love to have. Someone who would understand that not making that money now and here, but I'll be rewarded elsewhere. Well, it's never easy, meaning to say that, when you transition into Islamic Wealth Advisory, you are taking on a lot more responsibility. Of course, you are a financial planner, and whether you are a conventional financial planner, whether an Islamic financial planner, the financial planning is the same, so to say, except that when you go into the so-called Islamic Wealth Advisory, there's this overlay of the so-called Sharia aspect, and that carries responsibilities, because it is, after all, something that's got to do with religion. And so therefore it is something that you need to actually make sure that you expand correctly, that you provide it in a correct manner, because you do not want to mislead people when it comes to matters of religion. So that is really a very heavy responsibility on top of what the normal financial planning responsibility that you have. Well, there are, and in fact yourself, Afid, okay. I believe when you first came in, your knowledge of Islamic financial planning, while was there, probably isn't as good as where you are today. And so I've seen you grow into this particular particular individual who now confidently talks about wasia, talks about zakat, talks about wakaf, and these things. And I think you are a very typical example of someone who comes in to FAiWA with some knowledge, but throughout the years, that knowledge grows and exponentially, and very quickly, that individual like yourself becomes an expert in Islamic financial planning. So FAiWA being at the corporate level means to say that FAiWA is an entity within Financial Alliance itself. And being at the corporate level means FAiWA sets the training for the so-called FAiWA consultants. Yeah, so we do yearly trainings for FAiWA consultants. It is typically a 2-day training program where we bring in product providers who provide Sharia compliant solutions. Our Sharia scholar comes in, and I myself will typically give a session for the so-called advisors itself. Yeah. We have a certification after that. The attendees of this particular two-day conference or two-day workshop will have to take a test in order to be given the so-called go-ahead to use the Islamic Wealth Advisory designation on their name cards or when they go out representing Financial Alliance and FAiWA. So that's one aspect of training that we give. There's ongoing training. Of course, we invite product providers who have Sharia compliant products to come and update our consultants to let them know if there are any changes to the products, their views, and so on and so forth. And of course, there's the part whereby we also give what we call added value services. I'll give you an example. We do zakat calculation for our clients every year when our clients cash endowments or our clients basically cash investments reach their nisab and how we would actually send out letters to inform the clients that this is the amount of zakat that you have to pay for your particular investment with us. We also provide what we call fee-based advisory reports, whereby clients can come to us and let's say, for example, has a whole bunch of investments, wants to know which investment is Sharia compliant, which are not, has a whole bunch of insurance policies, wants to know which is Sharia compliant, permissible, which is not. We will be able to help them sieve through these documents and to give a recommendation as to which is, in our view, considered to be permissible and which is considered not to be permissible. But if you're talking about from the consultant perspective, then basically being in FAiWA itself opens up what we call a suite of Islamic solutions, all the way from investment to protection to estate planning, which to us is acceptable, which to us have gone through a rigid test to ensure that these, in our view, are compliant for our Muslim clients or customers itself. Yeah, so you can rest assured that if you join an organization like FAiWA, when you bring forth solutions to your clients, these solutions are deemed to be permissible. Yeah. So I can't say much for other firms or for a conventional firm and such, but for FAiWA itself, we ensure that basically whatever solution that we give to our clients, we make sure that these fulfill the standards that we set, and the standards are quite high, that these are acceptable and permissible. Well, I definitely hope that FAiWA will be able to grow its suite of solutions. I'll let you in on something that we're working on. To give you an example of how FAiWA puts in a lot of effort to try and ensure that the community continues to enjoy, as far as possible, Sharia compliant solutions. So recently, we got news that one of our funds that's available to the market, I won't mention the name, but it deals with basically gold mining companies. Currently, the fund no longer accepts new subscriptions. That means you can't buy into the fund anymore. It's very unfortunate because, as we know, gold prices have gone up. Gold mining company share prices have gone up. This is the only Sharia compliant gold mining company unit trusts available in the market. So it was a very good opportunity. In fact, clients who have been in it have been doing pretty well, and it serves as a very good diversifier in any assets, in any portfolio. You have something that's what we call non-traditional. Neither is it what you call typical companies, or neither is it on the so-called bond or sukuk side. Okay. And so, given that this fund has been effectively withdrawn, we are now talking to one of the platforms to see whether we are able to create something called a certain product or certain portfolio which will invest in Sharia compliant mining companies, Sharia compliant mining ETFs, Sharia compliant gold ETFs and such. Hopefully, and thus enabling our clients to still gain access to this particular sector. So this is a very good example of how, because we are operating at a B2B level, business to business level, we are almost immediately able to talk to business partners and ask them, can we solve this problem that we have now, this challenge that we have now? So Alhamdulillah, talks are going on very well. Left to be seen, but like I said, all the while we put in the effort, and inshallah we'll get the rewards. Well, I think one important aspect of FAiWA is again the educational part of it. What I hope to achieve is, at the end of the day, and to be honest with you, FAiWA will just be one of the entities in this whole solution. There will be other entities, because admittedly FAiWA by itself, while we can grow, we will be more effective. And I say when we is basically Muslim advisors come together, and whether we're from this company or that company, okay, to serve the community in a holistic manner. My hope and my dreams is that we all come to a more common consensus as to how to approach this Islamic financial planning. At the moment, Alhamdulillah, we have come a long way from very few outfits or very few companies having Muslim advisors serving the community, to now seeing a lot more Muslim advisors, Muslim groups, Muslim groupings of advisors serving the community. So I think we've reached a critical mass where, alhamdulillah, we have quite a good sized number of advisors. The next challenge would be to see whether we can get all these advisors to basically adopt a more uniform way of Islamic financial planning. And I don't say this with any ill intent or to say that I'm better than anyone else, but I'm just saying that basically if we could serve the community in a more coherent voice, I think that is better. And I say this because as it stands today, we have people coming to us who says that I have certain advisors telling us that it's okay to buy a conventional product. I have certain advisors who say that you can't buy anything because it's totally, everything is haram. You're within a banking system which has riba and so on and so forth, and that's the extreme. Okay, and then we have some in saying this and some. So I think at times the consumer can get a little bit confused, or the clients can get a bit confused. Yeah. Is there one particular solution? I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, it will still be some deviation from a common ground. But I think at the moment, what we're seeing is potentially too wide a spectrum of views. Okay. So personally, I would like to see that converge to a tighter, coherent kind of a viewpoint where we don't have this kind of situation. So at the moment, we at FAiWA, the demographics or rather the characteristics of our clients, if you were to ask me, are those who are a little bit more, again, I don't like to use the word strict, but I say a little bit more conscious conscious about the Sharia aspect. They may have read more, they may know a little bit more, and therefore a lot of them, upon searching and trying to find a solution, come to us and say, finally, we like what you do. It's because you do things in a certain way where we are comfortable with. And so we attract that type of clients. Again, it's not to say we're right, it's not to say we're wrong, but I think at the end of the day, it will serve the community better if on our side we start to speak in a more uniform manner. If you were to ask me, the biggest misconception is something I've mentioned earlier, the sensitivity towards whether it's something which is truly required. And it's not Islamic finance per se in a way that it's the fault of Islamic finance. It's basically because for the longest time we have been operating in an environment which is basically one where we walk into banks, and I won't mention what banks, but conventional banks, and we do our transaction with those banks without even thinking or giving it a second thought. So we're very used to doing these things, not realizing that from the Islamic perspective, of course, at one point in time we did not have alternatives, but now we do. We have banks here serving us what we call Islamic accounts, Islamic deposits, and so on. And so I still find basically the challenge is to try and move that mindset. I remember when I was young and I first came to Singapore as a student, I used to travel, I used to stay around Clementi, Holland roadside, and there was this shop in Far East Plaza, top floor, which serves wonton noodle. So halal wonton noodle, which is my favorite. I would travel, I would get on the bus number 7 and go all the way to Orchard. It's like 40 minutes and have it and walk around and come back and such. Likewise, I think many of us, if we had a favorite halal store or food, or even typically when we want to eat halal food, we wouldn't be bothered by going the extra mile to find that halal food. We hear of people traveling who prefer to just eat bread and something very common, very normal, because they can't find a halal shop and such. But that sensitivity doesn't translate over to when it comes to investment and the finance side. Maybe it's because there's money involved, so that tends to cloud one's judgment and such. So I think that's the part where if we are able to break that mold and get people to realize that, hey, our religion places great emphasis on this. My role is to tell you. My role is to get to you and be informative enough. But at the end of the day, the decision is yours. We are accountable individually. I am not accountable to whether you invest in a Sharia compliant manner or not, but I am accountable to make sure that you know about it, that you are given the opportunity to do it, okay? And the decision then lies with you. So I think that's one thing which I think is something that I would like to see going forward. To a mainstream institution, it's all about dollar and cents. So basically, it's about what can you bring in, how much. If I produce a Sharia compliant product, how much can you sell, and so on. So it's challenging sometimes because, understandably, population is very small. Muslim population, 500,000, 100,000 households. And how I try to get around it a lot of times is to tell these institutions, similar to FAiWA, there is enough space for at least 1 or 2 big players. And so if you are the first one to come up with a particular product, first one to be in this particular area, then you have a high chance of gaining market share because the market is big enough for 1, 2 players. So we have seen some institutions actually buy into this idea. So therefore, for example, we work with Philip. We created this Islamic REITs portfolio, and so on. So there are opportunities, but again, within the confines of a very limited market. I think regulation is a little bit more broad. It applies both to conventional and maybe, let's say, for example, Islamic financial planning, because it governs all aspects of financial planning. So from the perspective of adhering to regulation, it is required that you are regulated. So all Islamic financial planners are regulated. If you're talking about the regulatory challenges from the product perspective, then you could make some inferences or arguments. For example, we do not have, and I mentioned this, a sukuk fund that's CPF approved, because there are certain challenges there, among which is bonds / sukuk funds need to be what we call investment grade. Okay, understandably, it's CPF money, need to be safe. So if you're going to put your money into a bond fund has to be investment grade, which is what we call BBB and above. Given that sukuks are basically, the majority of them come from either the Middle East or Malaysia and Indonesia, you'll find that some Middle East countries are non-investment grade. And so typically you find in sukuk funds a mixture of investment and non-investment grade. So regulation then prohibits or puts a challenge there for sukuk funds to list themselves on the CPF for the use of Muslim investors because of this regulatory requirement. So that's just one example. And of course, that's that forever that so-called situation with the CPF, the use of CPF for housing, which is an ongoing debate that has been going on for a very long time. Yeah. So again, I think some challenges are a bit more difficult. Personally, some areas I think we can make a lot more headway, and I hope to spearhead some of this in the future if there's an opportunity. Give you an example. In the conventional side of things, one of the biggest, fastest growing sector is called private credit. Private credit is basically where investors come in and they become the lenders, and the vehicle, which is the private credit fund, then serves as the entity which lends money to borrowers. So it's a de facto, I'll use the word bank, but a de facto non-financial institution. Okay. And we do have now certain platforms which do these kind of so-called crowdfunding, which provide funding for Islamic companies, Muslim companies and such, getting money from Muslim investors. What if there was a way to create a fund that would help to pay off the debt of Muslims who are now struggling to pay off the debt? Credit-wise, they are good. They've got a job. They've just made some bad investment decisions or credit decisions, and they're saddled now with debt. And they've been in a job for many years, but it's just that 40-50% of their salary keep on going to. They're struggling. They're trying very hard to keep up with the payments and such. Okay, and we know after a certain point these things spiral, and all they need is this opportunity where you pay them off and help them pay off the debt, and their life changes. Okay. Of course, we know in Islam you can't charge interest, and so this particular fund would have to be basically Qadu Hasan. You won't get anything, but it allows for the administration to be paid, administrative fees and so on to be paid. Yeah? So the returns would effectively be zero for investors. Yeah? But I'm pretty sure that if we put some thought to it, we could, in a way, even put in certain investment element in it, which is Sharia compliant, to provide certain returns for the investors. So I'm just always thinking at the top of my mind, could we do something like this where the investors are still rewarded and yet they're doing something good in terms of this, and they are doing it in a Sharia compliant manner because it's Qadu Hasan. I think it's possible. I'm giving it thorough thought, but again, it's still in the early stages. Yes, I mean, again, these trends tend to emerge first on the conventional side, and I think that's because that is the bigger portion of the financial industry. And so on the conventional side, what you're seeing is basically the awareness now that what we call non-core related products, alternative investments, which used to be only for high net worth individuals, are becoming more accessible to individuals who are, I won't say not high net worth, but probably just meeting that high net worth criteria, and increasingly being available in the retail space. Okay, so similarly, I would like to see, and we are already basically seeing a small group of alternative investments which are Sharia compliant. Now the big question is, similar to the conventional side, will we also see some retail alternative investment? Yeah, so I hope that's going to happen. That's one thing I think we ought to be following very, very closely. And of course, I think we are awaiting the introduction of the Takaful plan. I had previously, when the previous Takaful plan was in operation, i.e. the HSBC Takaful from the Capo days, okay, made a pledge at that time whereby I funded a Takaful plan in order to, and as that amount cash value reached 10,000, you would wakaf that plan. Okay, and so one of the other things which I think I've always asked our consultants to ensure that they do this is to make sure that individuals in either their insurance policies or their wasiat provide that element of wakaf contribution, because at the end of the day, that's where our institutions, whether the madrasas, whether the mosques, can receive fairly large amounts from individuals who have deceased or consciously save money. And you will find that basically that is very, very important, because we must understand that in Singapore, many of our institutions are self-funded by the community. Very similar to conventional in a way, okay? Because it's a tool. And so it's a tool which I believe in the very first phase will be assistive. It will assist financial planners in doing their work. Whether you're conventional or Islamic, it will help you. It helps you to become more efficient, helps you to identify things which probably a human advisor sometimes may not be able to identify, okay? Certain risk factors and so on, and thus makes you a more productive and more efficient advisor to be able to serve your client. Okay? The challenge is, and we've talked about AI now, okay? I think the next phase after that, where I personally feel that AI will move into a phase where it starts to challenge and take over the job of advisors. And again, it's not just peculiar to Islamic financial advisors, but also conventional advisors. So we will reach a point where AI is, so advisors who are not competent as the AI gains in terms of its intelligence, as it gains, increasingly you are going to fall below the mark of the AI advisor, or AI which is as an advisor driven by AI, and increasingly those will be weeded out. Those advisors will be weeded out. So I think it again is not just a challenge to Islamic, but to everybody. So I think that's where we need to evolve as consultants. That's where we need to think a few steps into the future every time and ask ourselves things like, for example, am I serving a market which can be easily served by an artificial intelligence, someone comes up with a particular app or platform who I can talk to, understands me and advises me, you know. Should I be moving into markets which are a little bit more higher net worth? Because why? Because if someone who has a couple of $1 million, he's probably not going to be comfortable talking to an AI who may not be able to pick up certain nuances and such. So that's a market which I think the AI will take a longer time to serve. So advisors have to be quite cognizant of this shifting thing, which is shifting very fast. Biggest opportunity is basically demographically. In many countries, including Singapore, you'll find that the number of Muslims / Malay community is the biggest in terms of maybe those under 30, under 40, say under 30, okay? Which in 10 years time, and it's already ongoing, are going to be recipients of distributions from their parents. And these are parents whom would have, in Singapore's example, own a HDB flat, which at this point in time is double, triple the value that they bought it for in the 1980s or 1970s. So that transfer of wealth is going to be quite substantial. And so that's where the opportunity lies. And I think Muslim advisors need to tap onto this opportunity to ensure that the can start now with the parents, that the transfers are made in accordance to Sharia and in accordance where possible and where feasible, in accordance to the wishes of the parents, and then focus on helping this generation manage the amount of money. It is going to be large. I think that's a key thing. Yes, I'm an economist. Alhamdulillah, I also have a CFP, Certified Financial Planner, and therefore I've been involved in the financial planning side previously before. So I understand what it is to be a financial planner and such. And so when this opportunity arose, the spiritual side was the main push. I have the skills. Now it's implementing those skills, but bringing on that Sharia layer, Sharia solution. So what keeps me going basically, and that was at the very beginning, it was a very strong push, is that I need to get people like you up and running. This is something which I cannot do alone. I can provide you with the solutions, I can provide you with the training and such, but at the end of the day, it's just you guys who go out and talk to the clients, and you guys are the ones. So, one of the biggest, always when I give talks, and especially when I give workshops and such, I always end it by telling the students, I hope, and of course during that workshop we speak about wakaf and such. So I always end it by saying, I hope whatever I've taught you today, I always joke with them, out of the three things that provides you with good deeds when you're no longer around, children and knowledge and amal jariyah. Amal jariyah is the only thing that's in your control. Even my kids today don't even listen to me when I ask them to go and sleep and brush their teeth. At 12 o'clock, they just continue playing their video games. So they're no longer under my control. Even knowledge, when I teach you, I have no way of guaranteeing that when you step out from this seminar room that you're going to use it. And so Amal Jarrah is the best. So I always joke with them at the end of the session and say, okay, so now I've taught you something. Make sure that when you go out there, you present it correctly so that inshallah I will get the deeds of a wakaf from that. So that's where I get the motivation to do what I'm doing, to teach you guys, to ensure that you guys go out there and serve our clients well in the correct way. Because I hope inshallah that whatever you do comes back to me in the form of wakaf. So that's the main motivation. In terms of leadership philosophy, I'm someone who delegates a lot. And I think this comes from my own experience, where I used to work for American companies, Australian companies, even a French company at one point. And these cultures tend to be more of like, you have a certain set of responsibilities, I'll teach you how to do it. All you need to do is make sure you deliver. Okay? And so that's my philosophy. So I don't tend to micromanage. I tend to ensure that you have what you need, the best, and therefore the responsibility now lies on your shoulder to deliver your part of the deal or your part of the job. So it's always been that. It's always to teach and allow people to grow and, yes, like yourself, transform into your own style and mode, but having started off with the correct foundation, so to say. So that has always been my leadership philosophy. I have no regrets launching FAiWA, so there's very little things I would change. FAiWA is actually one jigsaw in what I want to do before I take my last breath in this world. Given I have been in this line for very long, i.e. I'm known as an economist, a financial guy. So I've always felt that I have a responsibility to give back to the community from the financial perspective. Let's put it that way. And so FAiWA was that jigsaw where there wasn't at that point in time a particular entity that provided financial planning Islamically for the community. So I created FAiWA. Throughout the years and after that came an opportunity to create another entity under the auspice of the Association of Muslim Professionals called the Debt Advisory Center, dealing with people or assisting people clients who had problem with debts, whether it's moneylender, illegal moneylender, bank debts. When you're in debt, you basically serabut. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. Come to us, DAC, the Advisory Center, will teach you, number one, what to do, how to write letters to the bank, or even how to deal with moneylenders, legal, illegal, and more importantly, put you in a support group where you can talk to individuals who share your same problem, because it's quite a lonely place to be when you're in debt. And to have individuals who understand you helps you very, very much. And that has been a big success. And that deals with the liability side of the community. So we got the asset side mainly on the financial side and the liability side. I have also been Alhamdulillah, instrumental also in helping to see, or at least helping to launch the so-called Arahnu in Singapore, which is the Islamic pawn shop. Okay? Which is not a bank, but allows people to get Islamic financing via pawning of the gold and so on. Okay? And like I say, hopefully one day I would be able to create something along the line of Qardul Hasan lending and so on. And so these are very finance related. And I hope, like I say, when I leave this world, at least I know I've planted at least the seeds that will hopefully grow within the community to benefit the community. Yeah, so these are the objectives of my effort, to put some jigsaws in. And to be honest, there are a lot of other people doing a lot of other things, probably more than me. But I think collectively, hopefully, inshallah, everybody contributes a bit. My contribution is not a lot, but hopefully everybody contributes a bit. And at the end of the day, the community will be a better community, served better. The community's future is in your hands. When many years ago, when I was active with the Association of Muslim Professionals, I wrote a chapter in one of the so-called 10-year plans, so to say. In that chapter, I highlighted that our net worth, and our here referring to the Malay Muslim community, our net worth is not just measured by the assets that we own, but it's actually measured by the net assets or net worth of that community itself. And because I come from a financial background, you come from a financial background, when we look at the balance sheet, you don't just look at the assets. You may own 100,000, but if you owe 120,000, you are negative in terms of equities. Okay, and again, because I'm an economist, given we live in a world where leverage is basically a norm, and Islam prohibits leverage, where debt is a norm and Islam prohibits debt, you then realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited interest, leverage, debt for a good reason. We live within our means. We are positive net asset. And so for anybody going into this area, for leaders in Islamic financial planning, your goal ought to be to make this community stronger by ensuring that the net asset of this community is positive. Because otherwise, left it by its own, there is a risk that this community may have more liabilities than it has assets. And in an economic downturn, it's detrimental. The poor become poorer, and you will find that you find a lot of people get to pushed to the side, and will be worse off. So I truly believe that by ensuring everyone goes to every household has a positive balance every month. That positive balance pays off all the debts. That positive balance gets to be invested. Every household has a net positive balance in its balance sheet and creates a positive cash flow every month. If this can be replicated throughout all the households within that 1,000, 100,000 over households in the Muslim community, this is going to be a very strong community. So much so that in Nassim Taleb's model of the so-called anti-fragility or anti-fragile model, communities, there's 3 different types of communities. One where it's hit by a force and it breaks because it's too rigid. One that is hit by a force and basically it just comes back to where it is. There's another one that's hit by a force but it actually responds to it, learns from it, a bit like our immune system. You get hit by a virus. What does it do? It builds antivirus so that basically the next time it comes along, you'll be able to fight it. That's a community that will be able to last through cycles and cycles and cycles of crisis, business cycles, and will be stronger every time it goes through one. So as financial advisors, I believe truly that we need to move towards that kind of community, because you and I know the future for economies and financial systems and such is just going to be more and more volatile. Quantitative easing, all these kind of funny stuff. And so we are guarded from that if we follow what has been ordained for us. What you're doing is bigger, much bigger than what you think. It has a much bigger implication than you think. It is not just about you serving an individual or a household. You serve that household well. You make sure that if the father dies, the family can continue. You make sure that the parents or father can retire comfortably. All of this really strengthens that one economic unit. And if all of us do our jobs correctly and well, and all these pillars within the Muslim community become strong individually, then collectively we are very strong. So the responsibility is to make sure that each pillar is anti-fragile. So like any other service, there's always demand and supply. Okay, so one thing that's quite clearly happening, has been happening and will continue to happen on the demand side, is the demand for Sharia compliant products and services will increase. From 20% maybe 10 years ago, in terms of percentage of the community which requires Sharia compliant, to nowadays probably around 50, maybe even 60%. And that again is what I think it is. There's no real survey out there, but through discussions with fellow colleagues who are out there, we think now potentially 50-60% of the community requires Sharia compliant. And that number can only grow to 60, 70, 80, inshallah, one day to be 100%. Okay? And so that drives the supply side. And the supply side is, because of that, you'll see more and more firms, more and more individuals getting interested to be part of this ecosystem to provide Sharia compliant solutions to meet that demand. Okay. And of course, naturally, you'll find that Muslim advisors or Muslims who want to be an advisor will find that there is this pendekatan or closeness to the fact that what they're doing is not only providing financial planning, but also providing something which the religion is saying you should be doing so, given that you are a person in knowledge. It deals with aspects of the religion which is very important, riba, muamalat, and therefore it is, again, not just providing financial planning per se, but looking at it as a major responsibility to fulfill a religious aspect. So I think that drives a lot of people to come into this area, especially the Muslims, because they see it as a responsibility also, on top of the fact that it is, again, you have your financial planning duties, but there's also a religious aspect to it. Okay? And I'm very happy to also see our consultants who are non-Muslims get into this area, because we have to admit that Muslim advisors cannot cover 100% of the Muslim clients or Muslim investors or Muslim individuals out there. So there will be Muslim individuals who have non-Muslim advisors. And so we want to ensure and we want to make sure that when we send out non-Muslim advisors to talk about Sharia compliant products and services, that they are equipped. And so, alhamdulillah, I think we have done that. In fact, I find some of our non-Muslim advisors very knowledgeable in the Sharia aspect. They ask good questions and so on. And so I think we've done our job in terms of ensuring that even for non-Muslim advisors, they know their job very well when they go and serve the Muslim community.